Alright guys, so I wanted to make a video today about face masks. Um, some of you probably saw my flippant post about being at Home Depot and seeing, uh, you know, being looked at judgingly by some of the older folks that were not wearing masks. I was wearing a mask, and so that brought up some questions. A couple people messaged me and asked, you know, does wearing a face mask actually do anything? Is there any point in doing that? So I wanted to talk about droplets and aerosols and face masks and sneezing, um, and kind of just walk through together what it does and does not do, how it does or does not help. So for those of you who don't want to watch this whole video, the short story is um, wearing a mask is likely going to allow a lesser amount of the virus into the air. So if everyone's wearing masks, there's just less of it to breathe in. It is unlikely to prevent you from breathing in virus that is already in the air. And then depending on the kind of mask you're wearing, it's going to either prevent you from spreading a lot of virus or prevent you from spreading some virus. So let's just kind of go through this. I found something interesting. The first person that really studied this, and this is kind of considered the the basis for respiratory illness spreading, was a guy by the name of Wells. I don't know his first name, but his last name was Wells. And I'm actually going to backtrack here a little bit. I actually did read a story about a couple of the founding fathers. One of them being Benjamin Franklin, and he was going somewhere with, I think it was Adams. Anyway, um, and the other guy had a cold. Franklin didn't. And at that time, of course, they had no concept of bacteria, viruses, any of that. That was completely outside of the realm. Franklin, of course, absolute genius. So they get into this hotel and they have to share a room. Um, and so Franklin opens the window, and the other guy, who I think was Adams, John Adams, says, "Hey, why are you opening the window?" And Franklin says, "Well, I have this theory that it's me breathing the air that you breathe out that would make me sick. If we keep the window closed, I'm going to be sick by the time we get out of here. So they keep the window open. He doesn't actually end up getting sick." So even back then, there was a few people. Now he was considered a little bit radical in a lot of ways, but there were some people who were kind of getting this. But the first guy that really studied it, tried to figure out how far these droplets could go, what kinds of droplets were coming out, was this guy named Wells. And Wells, I'll just show you the little graph that he created. So he measured droplets. These are measured in whatever this is. They're called microns with an M. That's 1/1,000,000th of a meter. So generally now the consensus is if it's less than 5 microns, then that's considered an aerosol, which basically means it leaves your mouth or your nose and it dries up almost immediately. So we're talking about this kind of stuff that evaporates, but these, because they evaporate, they go a lot further. Okay, they're able to kind of enter into the air and they just kind of float around. Whereas droplets tend to be bigger than 5 microns, and they remain humid, they remain wet until they land on something a lot of the time. It takes a lot longer. So here we have, the droplets. We have our times here, between 0 and 4.5 seconds. the time to evaporate completely, and the time to reach the ground. Now, all of this is affected. There's been a lot of studies about this. This was kind of the standard until about the 50s or 60s when people started studying it again. And that's when they realized there was, there was all kinds of droplets, that there was aerosols and so forth. But this is still kind of the basis of all of that. So, what you see is these, once they get to a certain point, they're taking a lot longer to reach the ground. And the reason why is they're flying further. They have more mass, and so they're flying further. Now, keep in mind, he wasn't studying the less than 5, the stuff you can't see. The way they do it now is they do all this black light or dye, and they use that to try and measure this. So let's look at a couple of videos real quick of sneezing. So we have this video here, and hopefully the sound works for you guys. This was done by ABC back in 2014. Now, I tried to find sources about sneezing and about droplets from prior to this pandemic, because I didn't want it tainted by people's perceptions and what they want us to see and believe and feel about droplets and sneezing and coughing and masks currently. I wanted to go back and see what were people saying a few years ago when it wasn't at the forefront, when this was kind of just a curiosity rather than something that has a lot of emotion tied to it. So let's just watch this video.
Marcus plays the rude guy, sneezing without blocking at all. Look at that dye. We found a small part of it landing almost 11 feet away. Round 2. Elara covers her mouth with her hands. Just like Mom always said, she can't block at all, and some of it landed 3.5 feet away. And look at all of that on Elara's hands. Disgusting. Round 3. What about that newer move we've been advised to use? The Dracula sneeze into your elbow.
Okay, so I wanted to stop it right here. Check this out right here. So she sneezes into her elbow, right? Now she's a little high. I think you're supposed to get a little bit further in there, right? But in the spur of the moment, when you're sneezing and not really paying attention, I think a lot of people probably do end up just like her, where they're covering their mouth for the sneeze, their nose is wide open, and most of the fluid's going to come out of your mouth in a sneeze anyway. It comes out of that thing that we do when we sneeze, right? Well, most people. I sneeze really weird. I just kind of go. People make fun of me for it, but it's hitting her shirt, and it is bouncing up. What's really interesting.
Better, but look how much is still getting through.
That actually ends up
parts of that sneeze landed 8.5 feet away. So if you're spreading germs sneezing.
Now, the difference, of course, is if you sneeze into your elbow, even if it bounces in a little bit, it gets 8.5 feet away, like it did in this case. Your hands are still clean, right? Imagine this being somebody in a store. They sneeze on their hands. They touch everything. They touch their cart. They touch the keypad. They touch all this stuff. And that's going to spread those germs all over the place. Whereas if you sneeze into your elbow, at least your hands are still clean, right? You're not going to spread it that way.
Even when covering your mouth and sneezing into your elbow, is there anything you can do? Grab a tissue. Believe it or not, with Marcus sneezing right into the tissue, we found nothing.
So, of course, this is completely anecdotal, right? That they found none of the dye on their white sheet that they laid out when somebody grabbed a tissue and covered their nose to cover their mouth to sneeze. But it does kind of show, what you would expect with a mask. So you see all that fluid going out. Some of those are really big drops. A lot of that is going to be stopped really by anything in front of your face. So you put your hands in front of your face, put your shirt in front of your face, and you pull your shirt up like this, it's going to stop a lot of those bigger droplets. Now that's important because if we look at here on Worldometers. Now Worldometers is a site that just aggregates data I believe that it is a fairly reliable site. They're not affiliated with any different political organizations. They just gather data from everywhere in the world and aggregate it here. And a lot of their information about COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 is coming from the CDC. That's where most of the data is right now. So the way that they think it spreads, the majority is close contact. And I've been working as a contact tracer here in Utah, calling people who have come in contact with people. That's what I have found is, for the most part, it's spreading in families, people that live in the same home. It's very difficult to not spread something like that. You think about the cold or the common flu. It often spreads. You get it at school, and then it spreads throughout your family. So that's probably the main way that this is spreading, which is actually nice because it's easy. If people self-quarantine voluntarily, they're able to stop that spread. After a couple weeks, that stops going to other people. It's a lot harder if it spreads other ways. And then the other way is droplet spray and then aerosol. Now, this particular COVID-19 is believed to spread in close contact, people with close contact to each other, through respiratory droplets and not necessarily through aerosols. So that's why they're talking about keeping that 6 foot distance, because if we look at this guy here, right, and we're looking at our distance, most of these droplets aren't really going that far. And so that's why there's that 6 foot distance, is because we're not as worried about aerosols as we are about droplets. Now, that's good news for people who are wearing masks, because the masks, by and large, do very little to stop aerosols. Your aerosols are going to go straight through. Particularly those cloth masks, like the masks that that everyone's just sewing for themselves. Unless you're putting some kind of extra material in the middle there, if it's just a cloth mask, aerosols are probably going straight in and right through that. It inhibits about 2% of the airflow, right? For those, based on a study that was recently done about this. They found that those cloth masks stop about 2% of the airflow, and really a negligible amount of the aerosol. However, they're fairly good at stopping droplets. And since COVID-19 is spread mostly in droplets, then that's really pretty good. Now, so let's see. So I wanted to watch one more video of a sneeze before we kind of wrap this up. This was done. I can't remember when this video was. I got it. I pulled this from the National Geographic. I'm a subscriber there, and they had an article. So I pulled it from theirs. I find it fascinating. So let's watch that. They kind of do it in different distances. So you can see these droplets, right? But you can also see up in the corner over here, you're seeing aerosols, right? Those are completely desiccated. They're completely dried up, and they're just floating away in the air. Now, we wouldn't be so worried about these with COVID-19. As far as data that is currently available, COVID-19 would not be really spread in this kind of cloud of air that's going. Now, what I did see was a couple of studies that said, you see how it's kind of, you got this back roll here? That has been shown to sometimes carry droplets much further than they would normally go, right? Normally they would fall pretty straight down. But see how there's kind of an uplift here in the air. And look at how far those aerosols can go. I mean, that is 26 feet. 26 feet, guys. And that is carrying droplets with it. So the main purpose of a mask, from what I can have been able to read, it's going to do a pretty good job of stopping me. If I'm wearing a mask, it's going to stop me a large amount of my droplets from going out. And those can happen even when you're just talking. You release droplets, not at the same rate, obviously, as here, but a cough or a sneeze is going to send out about what we were just looking at. And with a normal mask or a surgical mask, you're looking at about 70% of your air is going through that mask, about 30% is coming around the outside. So for a sneeze, you're going to expect to see about that. About 70% is going to go through the mask, about 30% is going to go around the mask. And a lot of that is going to catch those bigger droplets, right? Any things that are above 5 microns. Now an N95 mask, if I remember correctly, N95 masks, those are the ones that fit really tight around your mouth, and that's stopping, pretty much anything that is bigger than like 3 microns is being stopped by that. So you're doing a very good job. You're even stopping some aerosols with those, and that's also preventing stuff from coming back in. That's not to say that it's really going to help you prevent you from getting COVID-19 if it's floating around in the air, because you're probably getting that on you. Then you're touching your face, your mouth, your nose, your eyes, and it is getting inside of you, right? So really what they're trying to do with asking us to wear masks is they're saying, let's try to keep as much of that out of the air and off of surfaces as we can. That's how it's preventing the spread. It's not preventing, I don't think it necessarily prevents me from getting exposed to the virus when I go out and about. But it does prevent me, should I have it and be asymptomatic, which is a pretty reasonable assumption is that I would get it and not be symptomatic because I'm young and pretty healthy. It would prevent me from spreading it as much. Now, it's not 100%. And that's kind of where I see people have this mindset of either it's 100% effective or it's 0% effective, and that's just not the case. We're looking at like a 70% effectiveness, right? Well, 70% of the air, and then you're taking maybe another 70% out that doesn't go through, right? Now, a lot of this could change if they find out that it actually is transmitting through the aerosols. Then the masks are going to make a lot less sense. It's still going to transmit better in the droplets, and so you're still doing kind of a public service when you try to do that. I wanted to do one more thing. Let me pull up this study. Let's see. If you just Google mask wearing and survey, they just did this survey, which I found was really interesting. Now, of course, I can't find it now that I'm talking to you guys about it. Okay, here we go. So this is just a survey. It's not really a study. It's just a survey done by The Conversation. I'm not super familiar with this publication, so I can't really vouch for them. Reading the article, it does seem that they have a bit of a left-leaning, or at least they're not huge fans of President Trump. But I felt that the survey was interesting enough to bring up here. So they asked people what they're doing, and then they asked them if they're Democrats or Republicans. What's interesting is it's pretty even. I would say this is probably within the margin of error. The margin of error is 3%, so just barely outside the margin of error here. These could be within 1% of each other. Everyone's washing their hands more. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you're washing your hands more. Probably using hand sanitizer more. A lot of us are wearing more face masks. whatever side of the aisle you're on. Now, one of the theories here is Democrats are seeing their governors, their representatives wearing face masks. Republicans are not seeing their president, their congressmen wearing face masks. And so you see a little bit less uptake as far as wearing masks go. But this isn't a huge difference, guys. That's pretty close still. That's with 13% maybe. It's still more than half of Republicans are wearing face masks. Not a lot of people wearing gloves, which I could see why you might want to. Most people avoiding social events. A lot of people avoiding public transport. More than half of people trying to touch their face less, going shopping less. Not a ton of people staying home from work. Obviously, a ton more than we normally see, but not a huge amount. And that's probably because a lot of people just don't have the option to stay home, right? I know I have the opportunity to work from home, but if I couldn't work from home, I'd be going to work. I can't really afford not to go to work. I think that's the same across the political spectrum. Everybody's got to pay their bills, right? And then more than half of people are kind of urging friends and family to take care of themselves. And this one I thought was funny because the one where we see the biggest difference is Democrats are buying a lot more food. And Republicans aren't. And I don't know if that's just because maybe Republicans were all, I say we're, but I'm not a Republican actually. But in more conservative areas, people tend to be more preparedness mindful of preparedness. Maybe they already have kind of stocked up food, lots of cans and things like that. I know here in Utah, a majority of people, or at least a lot of people, kind of have that mindset of keeping kind of some food storage there. Anyway, I thought this was interesting. It's a cool study to read if you're interested in it, or not a study, but a survey to read. It's pretty anecdotal, but the survey itself is, fairly representative. They interviewed a lot of people. Generally, you want 400 or 500 people, have a good sample size. They had 1,088, which they eventually went on down to 1,000. So fairly representative of people at large. They didn't take into account any of us unaffiliated folks, but that's where we're at. So to sum it up, I'm going to continue wearing a mask, not because I necessarily think that it's going to protect me. I just think it protects everybody the less virus is in the air, right? I think we're actually probably going to see a bit of a shift, just a societal shift, where if you're not feeling well, you wear a mask. I think that's something that's kind of come into our public consciousness. In Eastern countries, that's already very common. In much of Asia, that's kind of seen as a common courtesy if you're not feeling well to wear a mask and try and prevent the spread of those droplets. So I think we'll see a bit of a change, just a kind of a societal change as far as that goes. I'm going to keep doing it, try and keep older people alive, even though, they're on their way out sometimes anyway. Sometimes I wonder if they're just tired of it all, and that's why they're wandering around the stores, nose to nose with no protective measures at all. But that's my take on this. Hopefully that helps explain it for you guys. Remember, not good for aerosols, but we don't think COVID-19 is carried in aerosols. It is fairly good for droplets. The better fit you have on the mask, the better it is for droplets. And in general, we're just preventing more virus from being around on stuff, which is then going to help prevent the spread from being as fast. So that's it for tonight. I hope you guys learned something there, or at least enjoyed that a little bit. And we'll see you next time.